So I'm going to have you go ahead into your address posture. Okay. We can cross the club over our chest. Okay. And all I want you to do here is rotate the pelvis forward and back. Good. Good. So here I'm just looking for amount of rotation that he gets into both planes, and then just hold your address posture. Spinal posture in his address stance to see where his spinal curvatures are and mark that as well. This time I want you to try and isolate the pelvis, hold it still, and just move the trunk from side to side. If I think there's a limitation, I might come and just give extra stabilization at the pelvis and see if he goes any further in his range. Good. And then back. Holding shoulders still, I want you to just rotate pelvis from side to side. And same thing here, if I think he might be limited, I'm going to add the stability at the shoulders to see if he goes any further into the rotation. Right arm up at 90-90 and rotate the arm back as far as you can. I'm seeing where his forearm is in alignment to his spine. And then go ahead into your address posture. I'm going to compare that rotation to where he is in his address posture, which for him is the same, right in line with his spine. I'm going to have you sit straddling the corner here. You're going to hold the club across your shoulders. Cross right ankle over left. Knees squeeze together. I want you to turn as far as you can that way with your trunk. So I'm looking and using the chair as an angle marker here to see if he bisects the 45 degrees, and he certainly does. We'd compare that to the other side. Bring your feet together, knees together. You're going to bring your arms in front of your chest as if you're holding a volleyball. Yep. What I first want you to do is bridge all the way up as high as you can. Hold your pelvis there. You're just going to straighten the right knee out and hold. So here I'm looking to see what happens to that pelvis. Is he rotating and dropping? Is he starting to cramp? So about 10-second hold here. Go ahead, come on down. We're going to reset, and then we'll straighten out the left side. So here I'm looking for glute weakness or glute strength. So he's definitely able to stabilize a lot better on the right side, not dropping at all on the left here. Good. Any cramping or pain? No. You can come on down. All right, what you're going to do here is bring pelvis back to your heels, like you're going to do a yoga stretch. Okay. You're going to make a fist with your right hand and rest your forehead down on it. So you can put it right under your, so bend it. Yep. And turn thumb up. Yep. And straighten out your left arm. Turn so palm is up. And I want to see if you can keep your elbow straight and lift that whole arm straight up. So here I'm looking for scap stability and some shoulder mobility. Go ahead and switch sides. So your fist is, central right under you. Palm up, elbow straight, and lift arm up. So he's able to clear, which is good on both sides. Knees up at shoulder height. Once you're comfortable, you're going to go ahead and close your eyes and try and hold it for 30 seconds or until you start to lose your balance. Okay. And then we'll compare it to the other side. Yep. Most people do fail at this one. Good. You're going to bring the club overhead. What I want you to do is go down into a squat as deep as you can. When you get there, hold 1 second before you come back up. So here I'm looking to see his trunk position in relationship to his tibial angles. I'm also going to come look from behind to see if he does any weight shifting right to left. I'm looking to see the depth of his squat. If he's limited, I'll go ahead and have him lace his hands behind his neck and do the same thing again. This relieves the upper extremity tension. If he can go any further, that's an indication that the lats are tight and could be contributing to the limitation into the squat. Tilt forward and back to loosen up the pelvis. Naturally, during our back swing through into downswing, we have a transition where the pelvis should move. It's a good sign of core strength and stability. And of course, in the addressed posture, we don't want to see excessive curvature in the lumbar spine. So we want to cue you before you even backswing to tilt under and hold here. All he's going to do is reach under, keep the pelvis stabilized as you're rotating. So this is for people who have some mobility restrictions in their thoracic spine. And we would do that both sides. So you're going to reach under with your, yep, and roll it out. Very good. Bar behind your shoulders, or club behind your shoulders, and you're going to rotate open and close. So you're warming up the hips. The hips are sustain a lot of rotation, loaded movement through the golf swing, so we want to make sure they're ready for that. Otherwise, we tend to compromise our spine. Good. In your addressed stance, I want you to hold the pelvis still, and you're just going to isolate trunk movement side to side. It's good to practice dissociating the spine. The more dissociation we have between the spine and the pelvis in the golf swing, the more stretch we can create into the backswing, which ultimately results in more power translated to the ball. And then you'll go into full windmill, which is full rotation, so letting the pelvis rotate as well as some weight shift here. And this is a good mobility warm-up exercise group to do before even going to the driving range. So most people, when we go into a bridge, which we're thinking for glutes, we just lift up through the back. And what we really want to do is isolate your glutes. Your glutes play a huge role in maintaining body posture, being able to hold the tension during your backswing. We shouldn't be standing up out of our posture, so this really helps with that. So I usually cue you to do that pelvic tilt backwards where you're flattening the spine. That automatically engages the abdominals here and your glutes. From here, now you drive up with the glutes. And you should feel like they're pretty tight at the top there. It's a big difference between just classic lifting up and down. This really isolates the glutes well. So up and down, you can do a hold. You can add bands for a little tension on the knees. And then you can also transition into less upper extremity stabilization for core control. onto the box. You're going to do a drive up with the opposite knee and rotate. So you really want to keep this part squared up and let your trunk rotate and back down. So up, drive, rotate, down. You can do it either side. That's another important, so you're going to go left. Aspect with training golfers is always train bilaterally. Even though golf is a unilateral sport, you want to train both sided muscles equally. Rotate to the right. Good. And back down. Good. This exercise is really good for working on loading the hip. So a lot of people struggle with a proper weight shift during golf swing, which will limit how much force they can generate and transfer to the ball, or they start to compensate through the spine because they're not stable through their hips. So what I'm going to have you do is essentially be full weight on the front leg. So this back leg is just out of the way. You're kind of up on your toe to give a little bit of balance. We're going to hug the ball. I want you to hold your knee right above your shoelaces and feel like you're loading through the hips. All you're going to do is isolated trunk rotation across, keep head over the ball, and come back. So again, try not to let the knee kind of weight come in or out as we're moving the trunk. Okay. Yep. Get that knee a little bit more forward. Good. And head over the ball. Keep head right over the ball, so only the shoulders, trunk move. Very good. And you feel it where?
Where do I feel it?
Mm-hmm.
My quad.
In your quad. Do you feel anything in the glutes?
Oh, yeah, the glutes.
A little bit definitely. As you're loading and rotating it? Good.
As I'm rotating it.
Yep, and that's the focal point there. So we'll do that on both sides. If they're an elder individual, have them start narrow stance, holding pelvis still, just pushing the band out. So here it's band resisted, and I'm rotating my trunk, opening up my shoulders, but then the band assists into right rotation. Then I'll usually have them transition into more of a tandem stance. The more narrow it is, the harder it is, and then eventually have them single leg stance for the higher level golfers, which is challenging. So pick one that you're comfortable with.
So
you could probably do tandem, yeah.
So tandem like this?
Yep, knees over shoelaces, and you're driving arms parallel. Yep.
Just like that?
Yep.
What was a tough one? Like this?
Yep.
That's weird.
You can do a little bit of in between instead of here. Really bring it right in line.
Okay. Like that?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Good?
Yep, and you'll notice you're kind of in your address posture. So not too far forward. You want to be a little bit more in address. Yep. Hold your pelvis in neutral. Yep. And your knee a little bit more forward over your shoelaces. So a lot of single limb control working through trunk rotation. So you're a lot of arms here. Let that trunk really rotate. There you go. We would do both sides. Good. So single leg stance, you're going to do essentially an RDL followed by a press, a clean press. So try bring it here.
Okay.
As you come through, I want you to drive the knee up and stabilize. So this is now core control. I want you to hold a second before you then come back down. So power up, hold, stabilize, then go back.
Okay. Don't hit yourself in the face.
Right.
Left foot on the ground with it?
Yep. Sorry, switch. Right.
Right foot on the ground?
Yep.
Okay, so.
Yep, drive up with the
Drive up like
opposite
this?
knee, and then
Yeah.
you feel that stabilization, so
Yeah.
you hold. Then you come back down. Good, and power up. So there's a little bit of diagonal patterning, a lot of core control, single leg control, glute strength as he's powering through to stand. Very good. So what you're going to do, this is your end position. And again, I want you to hold so that you're working your core, you're working your calves. Then you're gonna follow this down into a squat,
Okay.
press, down, drive. That's the movement. Squat, press, down, drive, hold.
Press down, drive.
So this gives us added stability into the shoulder blades too. Yep. So we squat down, drive, hold. Yep. So you should feel that stability work again in the core, the glutes, the calves, the quads. Good. Good. And I want you to initiate with a weight shift in through the pelvis.
Okay.
So you get more of that kinematic sequencing training now.
Okay.
So pelvis, trunk, arms.
Parallel.
Yeah. So if we're gonna start this way, we'll pull it back. So it'll look,
Turn it over.
and this does rotate, so
So pay
it's a little,
attention.
yeah. So slow weight shift to the left, load the glute. Yep, and you'll want a little bit more of a pelvic initiation,
Okay.
weight shift, then let your trunk and arms follow. Yep,
Better?
yep. Yep. And this side's gonna feel a lot more natural since we're used to swinging the club. The only thing I'm gonna cue you is when you weight shift to your right, don't straighten out that right knee. So weight shift
Okay.
without that.
Okay. Like no.
Yep, because you don't wanna lose that muscle to give you power and stability. Yep, much better. Good. Okay, so this is your report from what we generate in the motion lab. The TPI assessment is the golf movement screen that we did beforehand, so that looks at any mobility limitations or stability limitations that the golfer may display. That helps me to get a good idea of what I might see in your golf swing in terms of swing characteristics, but also what we should work on and implement with your programming that we designed for you. So
I need a lot of work.
It does. It's meant to be picky, not overwhelming. But I mean, your hip internal rotation is really important, especially for anyone who has back issues. Looking at a couple highlighted areas such as pelvic mobility, the ability to dissociate the spine, so torso stability for dissociation or pelvic stability for dissociation is important, as well as hip internal and external rotation. But we pick up everything just because your whole body goes into the golf swing, not just certain segments. So if we scroll down, these are the 2D swing characteristics that I video with the iPad. So what S posture is when you look at the picture here in your address posture, so this is right before you draw the club back, I look at the angle of your spine, and here we see that you kind of dip in a little bit, and that's indicative of an S posture.
Wait,
so
I need you to change the angle of that. So I just, yeah, let me see. Yeah, do it again.
Okay. So we want to look at the angle of your spine when you're in your address posture right before you take the club back. So here what I found was that you had an S curve, which is not so much from above, but your lumbar spine kind of dips in. I mean, this is accentuating it, but we want more of a neutral tilt there, which will help protect the spine. So that was the S posture. The other thing I look for is early extension. So if I set up a line here, I'm going to look for you to maintain your hips or at least one of your glutes on the line the whole time.
Okay.
So if I fast forward this into your backswing, you're still on the line. As you come into your downswing, you start coming off the line, and right before impact, we do see that little standing up out of your posture. I mean, that's mild, but it's still considered early extension. The other common one we see is loss of posture. So if we go back to your address here, we put, we put a line along your trunk, along your thigh bone, and then another line along your lower body. We look for you to maintain those angles, again, through the point of backswing and towards impact. So you can see into your backswing, you straighten out that knee a little bit.
Okay.
That's considered loss of posture. Trunk is still pretty good there. As we come into the downswing, we lean a little bit forward with the trunk, and you can see your head comes forward. So that's another area of loss of posture, but you can also see how much weight translated forward at your knees.
Okay.
So what I do for casting is at the top of your backswing here, I'm going to measure the angle here. And I'm going to look for you to maintain that angle to here. If you open up the wrist, that's casting, like you're casting a fishing pole. So I'll zoom out, fast forward to as the arm comes down to parallel, and you can definitely see that you start to open up there. So this angle here is bigger than the 58, so that is indicative of casting. So it's a swing characteristic. They used to use the term swing faults, but even the best golfers will show some of these swing characteristics, and it's not that they're bad golfers or that they're truly resulting in a fault. It just may mean that they could have more power potential, they could have more yardage, they could have more injury prevention if they can fix some of those things. So we can go ahead and scroll down. This is now the 3D assessment. So this is what the infrared cameras pick up in the motion lab. The biomechanist generates the report and gives it to me, and then I go through the data and gives you an idea of what does this all mean. Yep. So this is probably one of the most beneficial pieces here. This is the kinematic sequencing. So the Titleist Performance Institute tells us that there's not one correct way to swing for every golfer. Everyone's a different build, a different size, different strength. But there is one efficient way to swing a golf club, and that's having this correct kinematic sequencing, where we lead with the pelvis, the club, the hands. I'm sorry, that's wrong. Where we lead with the pelvis, the trunk, the hand, and then the club.
Okay.
So when we look on all these graphs, the margins are going to be the same. So the green is your address posture, the top of the backswing, red is point of impact, purple's end of follow through. So we look for the timing of these peaks on the graph, and that tells us what is leading first into your downswing. Okay. So for you led first with the trunk. We'd like to see the pelvis leading the motion first. Okay. That's going to be efficient transfer of energy that you just stored and wound up into your backswing. Now you want to transfer that energy into the ball. It's like taking a kid's hands at the park and you start swinging them around. You're moving a lot slower than their feet are moving around. Yep. So we want that efficient transfer. This is a great way to check and see how you're actually going to your downswing. So we can go on down. The next graph here is looking at ground reaction forces. So when you're in the motion lab and you're swinging the club, you're actually standing on force plates, 2 different force plates. So what this is going to tell us is how you distribute your body weight. What it doesn't tell us, though, is where our center of mass is. So, for example, you may shift your weight well onto one side, but if you're side bending, which I can't tell until I see other graphs, that might tell us that you're not shifting your weight, even though I know you are. Okay. So we take this with a grain of salt. I need to make sure I relate it to other graphs as we go through. But generally, we want to see equal right and left weight shift at address. And as you transition into the backswing, we want to see a big change onto your trail limb, in your case, your right limb. Okay. And then again, a transfer to the lead limb or your left limb as you're going towards impact. You can go ahead down. This is hip and shoulder turn. So what I take away from this, and you can go a little bit further down, is the difference between these 2 lines at the point of the top of your backswing here, again with that blue line. So for you, your hip turn was 22 degrees, your shoulder turn 78. That's a very large dissociation. That means for you, you can create and store a lot of energy. Yeah. What it might mean, for someone who has back problems is we're creating a lot of torque on the spine. Okay. So while this is great for a more modern swing style, it may not be great for everyone, especially if you have back problems. So it's good for us to see this and see the amount of dissociation one gets into their backswing. These are shoulder angles. So I pull a lot of norms from research, and this, research kind of contraindicates what the Titleist Performance Institute teaches us, in that every swing is different, and that's okay. So I take that with a grain of salt. If someone's looking for optimal positioning because they have shoulder pain, then I'm going to spend some time and look at exactly what they're doing with their shoulders, their arm motion during the golf swing. But I generally don't say, oh, you don't have exactly 90 degrees of abduction and rotation, let's change that, because it works for you. You're okay to have your arm down here into your backswing and do just fine. So this is just it's here if we need it, and gotcha. That's the important part. So we can go on down. Trunk and pelvis is something I do spend a lot of time on, so I can correlate this again to the swing characteristics that I showed you with the 2D assessment. So trunk tilt kind of, as you start in your address here, you then lose some of your positioning, so you're straightening up your trunk here, so that's what that was showing. So that's correlating with loss of posture. Trunk rotation, so this is telling us that you get quite a bit of trunk rotation into your backswing, so I circle that in green. That's a good number. Okay. Pelvic tilt, this red arrow is indicative of that S posture we talked about, so that excessive anterior pelvic tilt at address. We'd like to see more golfers be around 20 degrees of anterior pelvic tilt at address. What I do like to see is that from backswing to impact, that pelvic tilt drops. So you go into more of a neutral pelvic tilt, which is a good sign of core strength and stability in a golfer. So I like that we see that. I just like this initial number to come down, especially those who have back problems, but mainly to keep you from getting back problems. All right, hip angles, again, we can relate this to the swing characteristics that we saw in the 2D. So you can see that we start to stand up out of the posture a little bit here. That's what I circled. So that's the loss of extension, but more so the early extension that you get, or loss of posture, excuse me. What I indicated here was that for your right hip, as you rotate into your backswing, you're actually showing that your hip is still externally rotated, and that trail limb should be internally rotated at that point. So we're definitely not loading and rotating well through the hip into the backswing. So we want to work on that in your mobility. If you don't have it in your hips, you're going to try and get it from elsewhere. And that's what the Titleist Performance Institute teaches us, is the body is essentially an alternating system of stable mobile joints. Hips being mobile, lumbar spine being stable, thoracic spine being mobile. If there's a break in that chain, then we're compromising another part of the body. So that's something we definitely want to work on in your programming. Left knee positioning. So this is important for a lot of people who I see who maybe have had joint replacements. I want to see how their knees moving during the swing. Are they stable on it? Are they not? It's meant to be a stable structure. So I don't want to see a lot of movement at their knees during the golf swing. So what I circled here was that your knee started to increase its bend as you went from backswing to impact on your right side. So that was the loss of posture that I indicated earlier. You do get quite a bit of genu varis here, which is when the knee kind of kicks out a little bit. So I just want to see how your knee is, the stability of your knee, and work on that, especially in single limb, to get the most benefit on improving your stability in your golf swing. And then the last thing that we look at here is ankle mechanics, which the biggest ones I look at are ankle dorsiflexion and plantar flexion. So, and I correlate this very much so with that weight shift graph. So if you're shifting weight well onto your right limb, I shouldn't see that your heel's coming up into plantar flexion. So this is another way that I'm looking at the graphs and connecting them together to make sure that you're getting good weight shift, you're getting good rotation into one side as you transition into your backswing, and then transitioning into to impact and downswing. And then the other things that we put into your report at the bottom, we'll attach some pictures that the biomechanist gives you from your 3D avatar, but I always give you a summary of what does this all mean. So you get it now because I'm going over it with you, but in 3 months from now you're going to look at it and say, what is this? What did she say? Yeah. So, you know, this is kind of the meat and potatoes to take away from this. And then I always give recommendations at the bottom. No more than 3, because I don't want you to get overwhelmed with the information. But let's work on a couple things in your programming to improve what we saw in your 3D golf swing assessment.